Hello, my name is Barbara Straight, and you are here in the historic Santa Fe Depot in Dodge City, Kansas. The Santa Fe Railroad has a rich history, but the history that I want to talk about today is about my favorite part, and that's about the Harvey girls. Now, most of the waiters in Fred Harvey's dining rooms in his restaurants were men. It wasn't considered a very nice job for women. They were considered, it just wasn't a good job for women to have, so mostly it was men. Well, out west, as they were opening these restaurants and these dining areas and these lunchrooms, one of the problems was that the men, most often the waiters, were ex-slaves after the Civil War. And the cowboys were ex-Confederates soldiers. So the two didn't mix at all, and there were lots of fights. And the waiters were getting drunk, and he happened to, he was getting fed up with it. He happened to make a surprise visit in 1883 to one of his places in Raton, New Mexico. Well, the night before, there'd been a fight between the waiters and the cowboys, and one of the reports said that one of the waiters was slashed beyond recognition, which doesn't sound good, does it? And so Fred Harvey comes in, the place is a mess, they're passed out on the floor, and he fires everybody, the manager and everybody, and he turns to his friend who has traveled with him and he says, "Tom, what am I going to do?" And Tom says, "Well, let's hire women." Well, that's a great idea, except there weren't any women out west. There were very few women, we should say. There weren't a lot of jobs for women out west. Even in early Dodge City, there were, maybe saloon girls, there were teachers, and maybe they came out and they were married, but there just were very few women. So it's like, well, where are these women going to come from? But Fred Harvey was such an entrepreneur, he didn't let that stop him, and so they put ads in newspapers back east, like New York City and in Chicago and places like that, and in magazines. What they asked for were women ages of 18 to 30. They wanted them to be strong, hardworking, of good character, and they had to be single. Okay, not afraid of work. So, do you think very many women would want to sign up for that? Well, they did by the thousands. The thousands. Women from back east, women from out here on the farms, people who had no hope for good jobs for the future, wanted to be waitresses. And when a girl was hired, she had 24 hours to say goodbye to her family, to get on the train, and to go to a training area. And one of those areas was Kansas City, one was in Chicago. Well, if you think about it, I don't know how many times you eat in a nice restaurant where they have tablecloths and cloth napkins. Well, these girls, especially these farm girls, they had never eaten in fancy restaurants. They didn't know how to serve people. Mr. Harvey was a perfectionist. He wanted everything to be perfect, and so these girls had to be perfect in their job. They couldn't be sloppy, they couldn't be careless if they wanted to be a waitress in one of his establishments. So the girls have been hired, they've been sent someplace, like say Dodge City, and we have a dormitory next door. It's a 2-story building that the Harvey girls lived in. About 40 Harvey girls lived in this dormitory. Today, it's our office, and then it's full of props for our dinner theater, but it's a cool place. You can kind of see where the kitchen was, where the bedrooms were, where the parlor was, where they could meet their men friends. The dormitory had a house mother. It was very strict. They had a curfew. They had to be in at a certain time, and then the door was locked. Let's say if it was 10 o'clock, the door was locked, and 3 times if they were late, they were fired. They were not allowed to come back in. But they lived there rent-free, so they got room and board. They were able to live there. They got their food there. Their uniforms were washed. They were taken care of in these dormitories. So it was a really good experience for these girls. This is one of the first uniforms that the girls wore. And think about this. I think about if it was 100 degrees outside and there's no air conditioning in this dining room, would you want to be wearing something like this? This collar, they had to wear this collar, it's kind of tight around your neck. This apron was starched. This one is not starched, but this was starched, so it was real stiff. And in some of the books it says hugging a Harvey girl was like hugging a porcupine. So you can imagine how stiff this must have been. It had to be spotless, and if it got dirty, they had to go change immediately. Had the black blouse, the black skirt, the black hose, and black shoes. They couldn't wear makeup. The head waitress had a washcloth, and when they got ready to come out onto the floor, when the restaurant was opening, the head waitress took a washcloth and she would wipe their face to make sure that they didn't have any makeup on. They wore very little jewelry. They certainly couldn't have dangly earrings, 8 holes in each of their ears. They could wear a watch. They could wear a bow in their hair. They had to wear the hair nets to hold their hair back. One of the things that they talk about a lot was that their nails had to be, fingers had to be clean, and their nails had to be clean. And I met a lady, she was one of our guild ladies, and she'd been a Harvey girl in the 1930s. And she said they were always checking our fingernails, always checking our hands. And she said, I was so excited to talk to her. And she said, oh, I worked 1 month. She said, it was such hard work. I made it. We got paid once a month. I got paid and I quit. So, but again, they had to, they had to be clean and they had to be neat because the customer saw their fingers and saw their fingernails, saw their uniform. And so that was a must from Fred Harvey. So one of the fun things that I like that I want to show you is called the cup trick. Well, first of all, the first course, maybe it was super salad, was out on the table. Then the girl would come along, the waitress would come along, and she would ask the patron what they wanted to drink. If they said coffee, she turned her cup upright. If they said hot tea, she simply left it. If they said iced tea, she tipped it. And if they said milk, she placed it like this. The next girl would come along and she would pour coffee, get them water, hot water in a tea bag, iced tea, or a glass of milk. And she would never even talk to them. She wouldn't have to talk to them. And she'd know what they wanted to drink. But now that I've finished talking to you about the Harvey girls and Fred Harvey, we would like you to try this recipe that comes from one of the Fred Harvey cookbooks.